getaway to a house just behind the Andersonstown Road.
Well, they really started around 1969, so what age was I then? I was 11 years old. I was just becoming aware of political stuff. I was a young teenager when it began to notice things weren't normal, because obviously the inquisitive mind starts to compare the news broadcasts from England, Scotland, Wales with what was going on with your local news in Northern Ireland, and there was obviously a difference. We could hear our parents and elderly relatives talking about the Troubles, which was the colloquial description of what was a fairly intense civil war, albeit a guerrilla war between the Crown forces, the police and the army, versus the rebels, which were mainly the Irish Republican Army, the IRA.
You just got used to it. You know, if you went into town, into the centre of Belfast, you were used to seeing the Army Land Rovers. You were checked. The town was sort of blocked off. You had to go through security checks to get into the centre. You had to go through handbag searches going into every shop. But you just accepted that and got on with it, to be honest.
Up until I was married, I lived in North Belfast, which was about 1 or 2 miles from the city centre. And in my teenage years, I can remember hearing many car bombs going off, especially in the evening or at night. And these were big 300-400 pound bombs that rattled the windows of the house where I lived in. You saw the local news describing horrific incidents, murders, terrorist acts, and sometimes you would drive past the locations the next day and see the aftermath, especially bombs in large stores, you know, burning them to the ground.
The first thing we see on New Year's Day . A large B&Q warehouse has obviously been burnt to the ground, probably in a terrorist-related incident.
Right, well, Video Nation was a BBC project back in the early 1990s, where the BBC asked for contributors across the nation to help them with a community programme that was going to be broadcast on national television from time to time. I heard about it, read about it, and applied to be one of the contributors from Northern Ireland. I think there were only 2 or 3 of us from here. And what I liked about it was they provided you with a free camera, thank you, but what they called assignments. You switched your camera on to record. You then opened an envelope for the first time that had been sent by the BBC, and in that envelope was a question that you then had to read and answer live on camera.
I will be the first to admit that when I'm on holiday and I meet a foreigner that is non-Irish or non-British, I would tend to say I'm Irish. But if the talk becomes political, I would have to, of course, admit that I'm Northern Irish. And it is an unfortunate fact of life that Northern Irishmen suffer from a split personality. Some of them like to class themselves as British, and some of them like to class themselves as Irish, and some of them don't know what they like to class themselves as. I may fall into the latter category, unfortunately.
Thanks to my father, I was fairly apolitical. I had an open view and I was fairly tolerant. And I think that Jill and I took that even further. When we became responsible for children, we took the conscious decision not to even educate them by the politics of the Troubles, and we decided to let them discover that themselves, just in case, as we educated them, we indoctrinated them with some bias. So we let our children find out by themselves if they wanted to. That was our policy.
When they were old enough.
Yeah.
But that was dangerous in a way, because we're going to be exposed to children who did have a bias, who were Catholics, who were Protestants. How they would react to us, you know, it could have been sensitive. I remember Lisa, one of the first weeks she was in secondary school, she was quizzed on whether she was a Protestant or a Catholic.
And that was one of the prouder moments of our parenthood. Whenever Lisa told us about that, don't get me wrong, we answered all questions. And if our children came home and said, for instance, as Lisa said, a girl asked me today, was I a Protestant or Catholic? And I didn't know what I was, so I said I was a Christian. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that may have put Lisa on the spot. But she answered openly and honestly with no political or religious bias whatsoever. And as far as I'm concerned, that vindicated our approach.
Hello. Come in, sit down. I'm answering some questions for Video Nation. Come sit here. This is Lisa. How old are you now?
8, coming 9.
You're 9 next week? Okay. How would you describe yourself?
We didn't really spoil you. In some ways we did, with holidays and things like that, but in other ways we didn't spoil you. We were tried to be careful that we didn't do that.
Even though we did not want to produce snobs, we also recognised that our children were the luckiest children, amongst the luckiest children in Northern Ireland. They had rich, affluent, middle-class parents. They went to a middle-class church. You got on great holidays. You saw the world because we could afford to take you to places. You lived in the leafy suburbs with clean air. There was no terrorism. There were no gangs roaming to beat you up. You played in a large field out the back, and you don't know how lucky you are.
We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun. Yeah, the bonnie boat was one as we sail into the mystic. Hark now, hear the sailors cry. Smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirit fly into the mystic. And where that foghorn blows, I will be coming home. Yeah, when the foghorn blows, I wanna hear it. I don't have